Welcome to 4,000 Weeks, the weekly audio podcast dispatch, newsletter reading, blabber jabber from 4kweeks.com. I am Spencer. I feel like I already said that. If I didn't already say that, then I am Spencer. It is week 38 of the year 2025. Woo-wee, in a week it has been, in a week it's going to be. The dad joke of the week. Why is Peter Pan always flying? Why is Peter Pan always flying? That's an easy one if you think about it for a second. We will get to the punchline at the end. Meanwhile, let's dive into week 38. Week 38 has arrived. And still the only way, as far as I know, to live a full, content life is to see everyone through the lens of loving kindness, including yourself and including your enemy. That doesn't mean that you have to do anything or be any way. It just see people through the lens of loving kindness. When a person is nasty to you today, through the lens of loving kindness, you might think, I don't know what kind of day they've had. I don't know what kind of week they've had. I don't know what kind of life they've had. So I hope it gets better for them, etc., etc. It's time for you to walk over to your 4K Weeks poster and fill in another square. Are you done? First things first, doesn't really apply to the podcast, but I'm going to read it anyway. I'm going to start being ruthless about pruning the email list. For transparency's sake, there are 25,432 people receiving the email this week. I'm not sure about the podcast. I think, somewhere around 125 listens of the new podcast each week. 6,985 of the people who are receiving the email today have not opened an email in 30 days or more. And in week 40, I'm going to start removing all of the unengaged folks, and I'm going to continue to do that monthly. I would just much rather have 1,000 committed people, 1,000 earnest listeners, if you're a Kevin Kelly fan, 1,000 true fans listening and receiving the newsletter than 20,000 or 30,000 looky-loos. So I'm going to start really carving it down. And I don't know what that'll do other than if you're not paying attention, you might drop off the list. And if that's good, then that's good. I don't mind. I hope you find some way to fill your time with productive thoughts. Second, man, this week feels a little different. I don't know about you. I don't know how closely you follow the world. It's probably better if you follow it less closely most of the time. And it's not true all of the time. But the fourth turning, which, you'd have to go back and read emails if you just joined us. I talk about the fourth turning a lot. There's lots of books about it. The fourth turning is all fun and games when it's a theory. It's all fun and games at the beginning of the chaos period, but it starts to suck when you get to the thick of the chaos. I mean, seriously, much of the U.S. can't even talk about politics without shouting. I'm not typically political in this newsletter or podcast, but, obviously I have opinions and sometimes they get out and I feel like they're fairly mild and I always couch them in like a very neutral tone, try to be not to be partisan or super biased, or at least understand where my bias is. And that's, people get the most upset about things that I write when it's on the opposite side of their political beliefs. 60% of people in the U.S. read below a sixth grade level. That's a fact. It's not a judgment. And so for a while, it's going to be emotions and not rational discourse. When I think about, I don't write this, how they say every newsletter or every newspaper is written below eighth grade reading level, just to make sure that it's broadly accessible. I don't think about that when I write this newsletter, but I don't feel like it's fairly complicated. But if you read below a sixth grade level, which 60%, so 6 out of 10 of your countrymen and women read below a sixth grade level. If you read below a sixth grade level, likely that's because you don't ever read. And if you don't ever read, you're not listening to this podcast or reading this newsletter or any other nuanced intellectual discussion, regardless of the political leanings of the person having it, right? You're not thinking about what you think. You're just thinking what you think. And does that make sense? You're not thinking about whether or not you should be thinking what you're thinking. You're just thinking and feeling it. And that means it's going to be emotions and not rational discourse for a while. If you read below a sixth grade level, you are not thinking about the argument. You're just feeling your feelings. And that's a bummer, because we are in a place right now where people have really figured out how to send your feelings down a rabbit hole the way they want to, which is always conflict, because conflict is more engaging than agreement. If you make your money based on clicks, the way to do that is to piss people off, not make people happy, because people who are pissed off are much more engaged than people who are happy. But I will remind you again and again, as a wealthy man in the United States, the fight should not be between the right and the left. It should be between the 99.5% and the 0.5%. So just a quick number here. The top 5% of U.S. households, that's 1.3 million people. So that's the top half of a percent in wealth in the U.S. control $20 to $25 trillion in wealth. The bottom 95%, which is 330 million people. And so that's everyone whose household income, that's everyone whose household net worth is below 3.5 million, hold the same amount. So 1.3 million people control as much wealth as 333 million. And then it skews even that 333 million. So that's the bottom 95%. If you take the top 5% of the bottom 95%, right? So if you just take the bottom 90%, it's significantly lower, because wealth in this country is distributed more unequally than at any time in human history, including right before the Great Depression. We don't have good statistics on the Roman Empire, but seemingly also more unequal than that time. No empire has survived that much inequality for more than one generation. So, if you're going to argue with somebody, argue with a billionaire. Week 38 of 1952, Charlie Chaplin chose not to return to the U.S. after being investigated by the FBI for alleged communist ties due to having some left-leaning statements and sympathies. And it seems like we're headed this direction again. And it's interesting that it's, the same, the right investigating the left on this one, because I'm gonna leave it there. I'm not going to say anything anymore about that, except to say that the McCarthy period in the United States was one of our darkest. When just the suggestion that somebody might have a political ideology that is counter to the status quo means they can no longer work. Have some courage. Quote of the week. Lose an hour in the morning and you will spend all day looking for it. Richard Watley. Lose an hour in the morning and you will spend all day looking for it. What are you doing right now? What are you focused on? What do you want to happen? If you want to get somewhere, even if that somewhere is on a beach with a book, right? You better have a plan. And if you don't have a plan for the days, it is so easy to lose a month. And you don't have that many months. When my wife and I were younger and the kids were just starting daycare, so they had to be a certain place at a certain time. Back then, my wife still had a job, 9-to-5 job that she went to, as opposed to working for the businesses or in the businesses. Every single morning felt like we were getting shot out of a cannon, right? Like you'd wake up, your eyes would open and they'd be like, boom, go, 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 go. Chaos totally reigned. And it is just hard to recover without a plan from being shot out of a cannon. It's chaos. If you have a plan, you can do it. And there's a saying in meditation that if you can't afford 10 minutes of silence a day, then you probably need 30. And the same is true for your day. If you are getting shot out of a cannon, because I'll be honest, our kids have gone back to school for the first time this year, and it is chaotic in the mornings until I get them out the door, until my wife and I get them out the door. And so if you just spend the rest of your day with that chaos, then you'll get nothing done unless you're lucky. But if after the chaos of the morning is over, you just sit down and spend 5 minutes and you make a list of the 3 most important tasks in order of importance each morning, and then you only work on those 3 tasks, then you can turn that day around. And if you make a habit of doing that, there's no telling what you're capable of. What I consumed this week, the telepathy tapes. Oh my goodness, this podcast. I don't know, man. It's so hard to walk down a road of investigation that is so fraught with tales of quackery and stuff. This podcast is insane. My physical therapist, Dr. Tim at Restore Thrive. I absolutely love Dr. Tim. He is he's the only physical therapist that I ever met. Actually, physical therapist is not the right word for him, but that's the one we have, who actually is thinking every second about how your body is moving. I go to him every month. I have gone to him every single month, and actually sometimes more frequently. Right now, I'm going more frequently because of my arm since 2020, because my back was really messed up back then, and he saved me. He gave me a path forward. And in anything in life, sorry, I'm going to get back to the point here in a second. In anything in life, find an expert that loves what they do and stays on the cutting edge and pay them what they're asking. It is worth 1 million mediocre people in that field. 100%. This is the kind of person who's like, well, there was just a study that said that maybe this, blah, 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 blah. That's the kind of person you want to find. Anyway, he recommended this podcast to me as he was viciously rubbing the scar tissue on my broken arm, which was, not comfortable, I'll be honest with you. But so he had my full attention, basically. And he and I have different foundational beliefs about the world. He's in a different camp than I am about some things, which is totally fine. I still love and respect him. But we do have a shared philosophy that we know very little about the world, and so that we should keep an open mind because of that. And that is, I don't actually care what your foundational beliefs about the world are, as long as you truly are committed to understanding your ignorance and finding out new things. Because we all know so little that, you got to put a stake in the ground sometimes. And if you put your stake in the ground there and also have an open mind, great. Anyway, you had better have an open mind if you listen to this podcast. And in the podcast, there's a quote that says, true skepticism begins with an open mind. And that's a really interesting sentence if you think about it. The telepathy tapes is about this community of non-speaking autistic people and their caregivers, parents, etc., who have for decades claimed that they experience telepathy, that the non-speaking autistic people, typically children in the first half of this podcast, can understand their parents' thoughts or their mom's thoughts or someone's thoughts. And it is fascinating. And it has gotten a ton of blowback because, pseudoscience and quackery and stuff. And I don't know if it's real or if it's true, but it sure is interesting. And I do know that I know absolutely nothing about how the universe works. Absolutely nothing. And so maybe. Next podcast, Diary of a CEO, Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio, former hedge fund manager. He certainly is in the 0.5%. Actually, he's in the 0.05% probably. I think he's got $13 billion wealth. But there's a lot of good info in this podcast about the fourth turning and the chaos that is currently reigning. And, it's kind of focuses on the financial aspects of it a little bit, but just the cycles, the 80-year cycle. And the chaos is not fun, but it is predictable. And then I just repeated this one little Instagram link in here that I really like. This guy basically is like, look, I'm getting older, and this, the stuff I'm working on has to count. I'm too young to do basic stuff anymore. Anyway, I really like that link, and you should check it out if you want to. What I am thinking about this week, oh man, it's just a bummer of a week. It's just such a bummer of a week in a lot of ways. It's also still amazing. That's the hard part. I was talking with my sister about this. My life is amazing. Most people's lives are amazing. Some people are going through chaos and pain and suffering, just like always. all the stories in the news are chaos and pain and suffering, a little bit more than always, or maybe a lot more than always. But gosh dang it, this week feels different. It feels like I felt after January 6th, where I was like, oh, things have changed. And so I don't know crap about crap. I mean, seriously, if I take all that I know and I compare it to all universal knowledge, or even just all human knowledge, I know nothing. And yet, how do you walk through the world without like knowing some stuff, without having some, you have to put a stake in the ground. And I mean, like, I know that my feet will not melt into the sidewalk when I'm walking home, even though my feet are mostly air and the concrete is mostly air. Why don't they blend into each other? But does that then keep me from being able to fully knowing and becoming one with the concrete? Like, is my belief limiting there? Could my foot be fluid and plastic, or the concrete be fluid and plastic, if I wasn't so confident in my belief that they are firm and material? And it is so hard to have an open mind. And it's harder than you think, especially if you just thought, I have an open mind, right? Because the second you say, I have an open mind, you have just like closed the door to how closed your mind actually is. Close the door. And even if you could just take the world as it is presented to you and not have to worry about all the various reasons that someone or a whole bunch of someones might be wanting to trick you into believing something, even then, it is hard to be open to your ignorance, because the world needs to be lived in. In order to live in it, you have to act somewhat confidently. You have to be able to, you have to know that when you take your next step, you're not going to float up into the sky or fall into the earth. You just take that for granted, because forever the road has risen up to meet your foot and you haven't tumbled down into an abyss of molecules. And historically also, for us upright apes, life has not rewarded us for joyfully saying, oh gosh, I wonder what that noise is around the corner, right? That curiosity, that open-mindedness will get you killed so that your genes don't get to move on to the next generation. The lion will just eat you. And yet, one of the most powerful muscles you can exercise these days, in these days of safety, and I know it's the most chaotic and politically dangerous period in my entire lifetime right now in the United States. That's a fact. One of the reasons this feels so unsettling is that for my entire life, and anyone else who was born in the 70s or the 60s, if you were born in the late 60s till now, you have only experienced, as a conscious being, tranquility for the most part. A tranquility that is anomalous in human history. And so I lost the thread there for a second. That's one of the reasons this feels so chaotic, is because it's just been so peaceful for so long. And so even in these days of chaos right now, one of the most powerful muscles you can exercise is the I wonder muscle. I wonder what's around that corner. It's the curiosity. Every amazing human-made thing in this world started with an I wonder. My arm, for example, broken, repaired with stainless steel, 0 days in a cast. I went straight from the surgery to an ace bandage, no cast. It began with a surgeon, likely in the 1990s or maybe even a little earlier, saying, I wonder if we still need the cast. I wonder if we can make this steel union in this bone strong enough that you don't need a cast. That's an I wonder. The car. I wonder if we could take this new steam engine thing and put it in a buggy. It's an I wonder. But that progress only happens if the world is a safe place to say, I wonder. If you have to worry today about finding enough food to satisfy your caloric requirements or your family's caloric requirements, you don't have enough time to say, I wonder. If you are worried today that some angry nation might firebomb your neighborhood into oblivion, you don't have time to say, I wonder. And change is scary. Duh. Progress is scary even when the rewards of that progress are shared equitably, right? Because it's change. So even when we all share equally in the advances, or maybe if not equally, close to equally in the advances that human beings are creating, it's still scary. And progress is downright terrifying when all of the rewards of that progress are flowing to a few robber barons, while that same progress steals you or your neighbor's livelihood. And as we see currently, all of those 6th grade readers who are responding to their emotions and not thinking deeply about the problems end up blaming the progress and not the robber baron, right? I guarantee you, if artificial general intelligence follows the track that some of the leaders are saying, so where in 3 years we have artificial general intelligence and suddenly 60% of people are no longer needed to do their jobs. I guarantee, and so that would be insane chaos. I guarantee you, if that happens, nobody's going to blame Sam Altman. We're going to be angry about, this non-traditional way of life, and, people will stoke the fears that are irrational and emotional. Nobody will say, hey, you 5 people who have been pushing forward this race towards artificial intelligence, you are the problem. Even though all the rewards will have accrued to those people, because somebody's going to make that money. And the U.S. clearly doesn't seem to have the appetite for distributing. And the only way for us to access the full potential of human progress is for each of us, especially those people who are currently set up to reap all of the rewards for the drastic change that is happening, to live into loving kindness for ourselves and for others. That is how we create a safe place to take full advantage of all the I wonders. And there's nothing stopping people other than their ego. Well, look at Mackenzie, what's her name? Mackenzie Scott. Became a billionaire in a divorce and immediately set about giving it away. I feel like that's the difference between a female ego and a male ego. I don't know. The feminine, I think, is much more charitable in that way. I'm not going to get on the soapbox of that. Anyway, the only way for all of us to live in the future, the amazing future where we have built upon all of the amazing advances. I told my son, we were talking about my arm, and my arm is an amazing miracle of modern science and medical technology, right? It's been annoying. It was a catastrophic shattering of both of the bones in my forearm. Not too many decades ago, it was a career-ending injury. Not too many decades before that, it would have been an amputation. And I told my son, if things progress the way they've been progressing, and he breaks his arm in the same way when he's 48, looking back on the way my arm was repaired will probably seem barbaric, because he'll probably just put his his arm in a gel, and then there'll be no incision, and the nanobots will go in and stitch it all together with some kind of modified carbon molecule or something, right? That's the future we could live in if we create a safe situation for people to say, I wonder. And until we do that, until we understand we're all in this together, we are leaving a huge portion of the amazing future we could live in on the table. And it's just so tragic. It's like if you think I can't remember who this is, who talks about all of the Einsteins, all of the potential Einsteins who died in slums, malnourished, of some easily treatable disease with a vaccine. Like, seriously, if you believe normal things about human genetics, thousands and thousands of potential Einsteins have died poor in squalor. But this has all been very negative so far, but I don't want you to despair, because it's an easy solution. You cannot change anybody's mind with your words, which is an ironic thing for me to be saying right now after 24 minutes of words. but you can with your actions. And so, embody the change that you want to see in the world and treat all of the people you interact with today with loving kindness, and keep wondering about what is possible. It's a very simple recipe. It starts with you. The change starts with you. And just a sidebar from a social media post that I saw today from a friend, without mentioning any specific circumstances. This person was railing about how one person held a view. How can you possibly think that about that person when I think this about this person? And they started comparing notes. And one person had only ever seen these kind of glowing, amazing, wonderful, affirming type of videos of the subject they were talking about. Whereas the only thing the other person had seen was all these horrible, hateful, vile, negative things that this person had also said. And because of the fact that a few companies make trillions of dollars with ad clicks, as long as people stay engaged, these two people had entirely different views that were both accurate based on the information that they had received of one individual. And so I think that instead of screaming at somebody about something, you might want to say, hey, you feel this way about this thing. Why is that? Can you show me the stuff you're seeing that's making you feel that way? And can you look at the stuff I'm seeing that's making me feel this way? Compare those notes before you start yelling at somebody. It might be an interesting experience. I hope you have a spectacular, I truly hope, gosh dang it, I hope that you have the best week of your life next week. If you do, share it with me. Gosh, I would love to hear that. Good news is always welcome. And that's it. I mean, I just hope you have a spectacular week. And, a huge portion of that is on you, which is so awesome to know that you have agency. You still have agency. Even when you feel like you can do nothing, you still have agency. Why is Peter Pan always flying? Because he never lands. Duh. All right, have a great week. I'll talk to you soon.